Okay, and we're live.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. If you've maybe seen me speak before, maybe not. My name is Leslie Rosti. I am the National Director of Education for King Research. We make barbicide and some other products you guys are usually familiar with using. And during COVID, we had a really interesting set of circumstances. I felt like I was getting interviewed all the time for things. And at some point, I kind of got sick of being interviewed, and I decided it'd be more fun to interview people. So we reached out, started talking to people who were interested in the industry, people who had interesting things going on. And one of the most interesting people that I met in all of COVID through doing this was Suzanne Post, who I'm going to interview today. Suzanne reached out and asked me about an opportunity for us to collaborate on some education. And I literally couldn't say no. It was the best idea ever. So, hi, Suzanne. How are you?
Hi, it's great to see you.
Yep. So Suzanne is from Nashville, and I'm going to let Suzanne explain a little about who she is before we get going.
So I'm so excited to be here talking about this today. I am a stylist and salon owner of 27 years here in Nashville, and I helped to found an initiative called Shear Haven, which basically has provided domestic violence education for beauty professionals. And this is something that's been super close to my heart because, number one, I know what a unique position beauty professionals are in to be that ear for someone who's going through a difficult circumstance. I also am a survivor of domestic violence. And I also recognize how important it is to have just that ear, that person to talk to if you are in a DV situation. And so it really was this initiative that just totally stopped me in my tracks when I heard about legislation that had been passed in Illinois, which was requiring this education. And so I approached the YWCA here in Nashville, and they agreed that this was something that would be amazing to introduce. And of course, a year ago, we are on our almost 1 year birthday of Shear Haven with Barbicide. You guys were gracious enough to roll this out as a virtual training that we can now offer online.
So this, like you said, it was a great opportunity. We sell product. Obviously, that's what we do. We sell product into this industry. But, we were really striving to be better partners with the industry. Like, how do we help beyond selling, disinfectants? Like, what do we do beyond this so that we're really helping members of this industry in a more profound way? So we got a call going together. And in the very first call, I remember you sharing with me some statistics. That was you and a representative from the YWCA, and you shared with me some statistics. Some of them I felt like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's something I've heard about before. I think even the ones I knew, like that 1 in 4 women are experience violence in their home. The fact that I think about all the women I've known my whole life, that some of them were experiencing that, and that even some of my good friends that maybe I maybe missed something in there. But there were a few statistics that you shared with me that really made me think, wow, we've got to have a bigger, impact going forward. Can you share some of those, like, sort of
Absolutely.
statistics?
Well, so because of my own experience with domestic violence, I had gotten involved locally in events that the YWCA had sponsored and offered for the community. And so I knew here locally that we were in the top 10 nationwide at the rate that women are killed by men, which is staggering. I also knew that, like you said, 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence, 1 in 7 men, which is something that a lot of people don't know. We hear a lot about the 1 in 4 women, but it affects people across the board without discrimination. So wherever someone's listening to this right now, that 1 in 4 statistic, that 1 in 7 statistic is something that impacts your community. Absolutely. And something else that I hadn't known was that over 50% of the calls that law enforcement receive here in Tennessee are domestic violence related. And so it's a really staggering issue. It's really almost this hidden pandemic within um, our community, and it's been made even bigger through COVID.
So speaking of that, made bigger during COVID, I mean, I can only imagine. Um, it's one of those things. I'm a Kansas City Chiefs fan, live in Kansas City. And as they were totally being destroyed by the Nashville Titans or whatever on Sunday, one of the thoughts that ran through my head was when we talked about how, a sporting event that goes wrong or that kind of thing, those numbers go way, way up. Somebody's mad and they take it out on a family member. And also, I started thinking to myself that COVID had to have made that worse. How much worse is that? Because then people were trapped in their homes, right? There was nowhere to go for an escape. Like, do you have any idea of the numbers of that impact?
I believe initially here in Nashville that the numbers to the shelter, to the hotline increased, I believe, over 50%. And by the end of that initial kind of wave of COVID, I believe by the end of the summer, they said that it was up an average of 30%, which is very staggering considering how underreported it is and how, um, so many people never call for help. And so that's kind of where the unique place of beauty professionals kind of comes in, because many people will never report it to law enforcement. They report to people that they're comfortable with or that they have a relationship with.
So that
And
was that's perfect. That's what we're talking about is that relationship,
Mhm.
right?
That
I
perfect
mean,
match.
we started another program at Barberside this year, an educational program based on just that, right? The power that a stylist or a barber has behind the chair, or a nail technician across the table, or your esthetician. You trust those people with the way you look, right? Whether it's always a choice who you go to, right? And you spend a lot of time and a lot of money. And if you're going to go spend that time and money, you start to develop this trusting relationship with this person that stands behind you or sits in front of you, whatever that their role is with you. And how can a stylist or a barber or a nail technician or an esthetician impact somebody's life outside of that relationship, or maybe even in a broader sense into their community by what you as a stylist have to say? So Shear Haven just played right into that. So tell me, if I am one of those, if I'm a licensed professional, what can I expect to learn from this program? And then what is my responsibility at the end of the day? Is it making me responsible for something that maybe I'm afraid to be responsible for? What am I going to learn and how can I utilize it?
So that's a great question. The goal of the training is basically to provide domestic violence 101 training to beauty professionals. I know in our initial conversation that it was really important to Barbicide, to you guys, that it be something that was accessible to anybody, anywhere in the world. Anybody can receive this training. And even if they're not a beauty professional, I believe it's a training that would be valuable for a nurse or for an attorney. I think anyone would find it valuable. But the salon specific training is to basically help you recognize the signs, learn how to respond, or even more importantly, how not to respond, and just what the resources are. Because I know that every stylist, every beauty professional I've talked to has said after going through the training, like, oh my gosh, I have absolutely had situations in my chair where someone has shared something, or I've even just sent something that I haven't known exactly what it was, but it just didn't feel right or didn't look right. And I just didn't know what it was, didn't know how to recognize it, or didn't know how to respond. And so much of it is just learning how to be that empathetic listener, which all of us intuitively are anyway. Everyone in the beauty industry has that heart for people. That's part of the biggest reason that we're in this industry. We make people feel beautiful and feel seen and recognized. And so this just kind of adds to that, just kind of gives people that additional tool, that additional layer of support and the resources. So when it's appropriate, if someone kind of opens that door, or if you have that opportunity, you know how to direct them. It's definitely not asking you to be the therapist or be the counselor, because that's not what our role is. But it helps people direct someone to that professional so that they can kind of get that support
Right.
they need.
I when these laws first started being passed, when there were a few states that passed laws around domestic violence training with license renewal, I at first I was a little anxious about that because I thought, are we making somebody feel like they're accountable for that? Like mandated reporters, right? Like if you're a teacher or a social worker, you're a mandated reporter if you think somebody's being abused, right? So if you don't do that, then you could end up in trouble by not reporting it. So that gave me a moment of pause. But what I recognize is that these laws have been written in such a way, and so has this education in such a way that you are not accountable. Nobody's going to come in and, let's say a domestic violence situation blows up and they say, well, I said this to my stylist. Nobody's going to show up at your salon and say, well, you didn't do the right thing, right? All
Oh,
it's doing
absolutely
is giving you education, right?
correct.
Right. So I think, when I went through the Shear Haven education, and I'm not a stylist, my background's in nursing, to your point, I think it's valuable for everybody. And I want to suggest that it's also valuable if you are in a relationship that maybe you don't, it seems normal to you, right? I mean, maybe what you're experiencing seems normal. Am I right in saying that a lot of people who were raised in violent homes accept violence as normal? Is that true?
It's absolutely true.
So seeing
Yeah,
that that's not normal, that not normal, but not something that you should tolerate, put it that way, or not something that should be a part of your life. This training helps to understand that, right?
absolutely. Um, I can speak from my own experience as a survivor. Um, so I know firsthand how isolating and just how scary it is to be in an abusive relationship, and how difficult just that first step can be. I know that for me, uh, it took me years to recognize what I was in. And it was someone who was kind of that mirror for me that allowed me to recognize this is an abusive relationship. This isn't just a bad relationship. And no matter how hard I work at making it different, it likely is not going to be different, because this is a cycle. This is a controlling cycle that I was in. And so just that information, that knowledge, and that person who was willing to kind of be that ear with me was what kind of started me taking step by step action towards something different. And, I can say that there's amazing life on the other side of it, even though it's a difficult road to kind of walk through. But having those people that supported me was everything. And so, I think that whether it's a client in your chair, whether it's your best friend that you didn't know how to support, or, possibly a coworker or an employee, I think it just gives us the tools to recognize it in someone else. And then it could very well, if it affects 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men, there are people in any group that take this training that may need that information, like firsthand.
So you brought up something that I feel like is also interesting, and that is there may be people that watch this that actually are abusive. There may be people that watch this that may be perpetrators, and may not actually see themselves in that role, and may also reach out for help. And I think that's important. But I also think the other thing that you touched on is that we all have this situation where we have a good friend and they tell us all their bad things in their relationship or their marriage or their friendships or whatever. And then it ruins our friendship, right? Because they've told us too much. They've given us too much information. Um, and that maybe the stylist, the person you see once a month or once every 2 weeks or however frequently you go, and you have a close enough relationship with, but not too close, maybe is that perfect mirror. It's that person that, your close friends, your family may at worst may not believe you, at best may have a hard time putting their arms around it, right? They know you in a specific way, as a couple or whatever. So I think that the two other questions I do want to ask, one is about perpetrators who may actually be watching this. Does this give them something tangible to go off of? But then also, isn't this maybe, I don't know, you said you had somebody who was a mirror. And if somebody's too close, that's almost hard. Like this is like the perfect amount of trust, maybe for this conversation.
Well, so to touch on the part about the perpetrator, um, people are not born abusers. Abuse is something that's learned. That's something that someone, to your point earlier, it may be someone who grew up in a very abusive home themselves. It may be someone who that was what relationship was modeled as. That was something that they truly did not recognize as toxic, or even if they recognized it as being something they never wanted to continue that cycle of, they find themselves as someone who doesn't know how to do relationships differently. And I would encourage anyone who wants to get help and to break that cycle to reach out to that professional. We have all of these hotlines in our training. We'll, provide them today. So anyone who wants that information can call and talk to someone, talk to a counselor, and just take that first step of breaking that cycle. There is help for everyone out there. And I would strongly encourage that. I think there's a lot of people that are in that situation that hate that they're in that situation, that don't want to be in it. And yes,
Can you give us an example? I know you get. I'm sorry about my dogs. Welcome to life in COVID. Can you give us an example? I know you gave an example of something a tangible example of something a simple thing you might see with a client that might start to get the wheels turning. I think you used the example of someone whose partner never lets them come by themselves, that type of thing. Can you talk that through? I mean, I want them to get an idea of what they
sure.
might learn in this training.
So abuse is basically a pattern of power and control. And there are definite situations that as a client is coming to see you, they are constantly always brought by their partner. The husband, the boyfriend always wants to sit either in the car outside or come into the salon and actually sit in the waiting area with them, where they just never have that break. They're always together. And from the outside looking in initially, someone who's never been in that situation might see it and be like, "Oh, it's so sweet." Their husband loves them enough that they just don't want to be apart. But and that could be true in an early relationship, where two people are just so together and so in love that they want to be together a lot. But if that is a continual cycle, that likely could be a red flag. And especially when it's layered with other elements. Of course, we are up close and personal, so we can see the physical signs, but we also are intertwined. I mean, we hear everything. And so we may know that our client, who's always been so social, suddenly is kind of getting isolated from their best friends or their family. And that could be a red flag. It could be that they're really nervous to make changes that they have always been excited to make. Suddenly the person who was willing to try anything new is like, I don't think they would like it if my hair was short. I need to leave it long. Or so and so really loves my hair this color of blonde. I can't go darker. If there's those layers of red flags on top of each other, that's usually what you want to look for.
Okay, perfect. So, we talked about some of the things that we've done after Shear Haven. For example, at Barbicide, we launched this Be Healthy initiative, which really was just about people understanding what being healthy means. What do the numbers mean? What does blood pressure actually mean when someone sits in your chair and says, "I think I have high blood pressure," or whatever? What does it actually mean? And so people weren't going and looking things up on Dr. Google or asking their aunt. There was actually real, legitimate health information. But also, we went delve into in that program things like high blood pressure, diabetes, asthma. What does it look like? What might the symptoms look like? And one of the things I was very cautious of all along is to say, it's not your job. You're not a diagnostician. But if somebody says this thing to you, I want you to feel like you can have a decent conversation, but it's not your job to know the difference between, um, I have to get up during the night to go to the bathroom a bunch because I have diabetes or because I drank too much in the evening. That's not your job to know that. So one of the things we work with, and I think it would be important in this role, is how do I start that conversation if I'm really unsure in a way that I can back out of it? You don't want to lose a client, right? Like you want to be able to enter that conversation, whether it's something simple and it's not simple, but more clear cut like diabetes. Oh, maybe you should go see your doctor. Now, when we start talking about this realm of potential domestic violence, what is the way, like, do you give them that in this? Will they learn how to start down that path and then know, oh gosh, I got to go back. Like I got to back up here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's it's important to leave that door open. There's times that you might just have to be an ear without offering any sort of feedback or advice. Just allow someone to share on the level that they're comfortable sharing on. Um, and also remember, it can take up to seven, I think an average of 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. And people choose to stay for so many reasons. They might have kids, they might financially not be in a position to leave. And so you don't want to put so much pressure on someone that it's like you had talked about with someone who's too close to the situation. You want to allow them the space to walk through the process that they're walking through and know that even if they try to leave once, they might go back. And just being supportive enough to allow them to go through that process. And we do touch on very helpful ways of how to kind of give people that space and how to support someone who's in that relationship.
I can see that it could be hard not to get mad, right? Like to not get frustrated with somebody. 7 times is a lot of time to engage your friends or whatever. And I'm leaving, I'm out, I'm done. Your friends who are very relieved, and then you go back. Your siblings, your parents, whatever. It's a lot.
It
Um,
is.
and I and I think that some of the support we talk about in that program, or you talk about in that program, also could be helpful for the person who's on that side of starting to get a little bit frustrated to understand it takes a long time. When we talk about gaining and losing weight, you didn't gain 20 pounds overnight. You're not going to lose it overnight, right? And you're going to slip up, right? It's the same kind of scenario where in all things in life, it takes time to undo what's already been done. And you and I even talked recently about one of the number one reason people don't leave is their pets. They can't take their dog to the shelter with them, and they're afraid their abuser will kill their dog or their cat, their beloved pet. And how, more shelters are starting to work together, animal shelters and, women's shelters, to try to find, a spot for that pet while that person is trying to rebuild their life. I think all of those things at the end of the day will make it easier, maybe make that 7, hopefully come down to 5.
Mhm.
But the resources that you give here are even helpful to that person that's getting so frustrated, because it seems so easy from the outside to say, why won't you leave? This is ridiculous. Do you not see this? But to your point, there's a lot of other reasons that someone doesn't leave.
Yes. And I'm so grateful. The pet shelter is one of the most exciting things in the world to me. And I can brag on the YWCA here in Nashville. They have just launched their pet shelter, which is incredible because someone does have that ability to leave with their kids and their pets. And that's a big people love. I know I love my animals so much, and that could be a very valid reason to go back or to stay. Um, I I think that, just having that space even for yourself, like recognizing that because it's a cycle, there's a honeymoon phase, there's a tension building phase, and then the actual explosion may be the tiniest part of that cycle. And so you love the partner, you want for them to stop doing what they're doing or for the relationship to get better. And gaslighting could be a huge component that makes them confused about what their part is in the relationship and is it their fault. that
Explain gaslighting, because gaslighting is a term we all throw around, but I'm guessing there's people on here who hear it but aren't exactly sure what that means. Explain what gaslighting is.
yeah, well, just any time that someone, when they have an incident, say someone in an abusive relationship, can tell that that tension is building and that there's about to be a big fight or a withdrawal. It could be that their abuser just pulls all the way back and kind of ghosts them or kind of leaves them out when they get into that place. But usually the abuser might come back and say, if only you had done such and such, it would have, stopped me from acting this way. If only you would be on time, if only you would pay your bills, or if only you had picked up the kids instead of making me do it. Whatever that thing is that they know is that thing that is going to push someone's buttons, or that they think that they can control by acting differently.
Right.
The abuser might just kind of put it all on them. And
Well,
so,
even the act of saying, "I was just kidding," like,
right,
that "I was just kidding," when you know what somebody was saying had true intent, like, they really meant it, they were just setting it out there to see how you would react, they were trying to get your reaction, and then they say, "Oh, I was just kidding," right? Because
exactly.
that takes that off of them, and I think, all of those behaviors are behaviors that, we need to pay attention to in every relationship, whether it is a romantic relationship, a spousal relationship, or whether it's even relationships with your friends. A lot easier to walk away from a friend than it is from a family member or a spouse. So it's, I think, why we see those numbers in domestic violence situations. One last thing before we move on to what's next, because I do think we want to talk about what's next. Talk a little bit about somebody who's in an emotional abuse situation, the person who would almost rather be hit so that it's visible, like what's happening to them. That it's not that much different, right? And is it a sort of gateway drug to violence, right? Is that most of the time like a gateway to it's going to progress and progress and progress, or because I feel like emotional abuse could be so significant that it in and of itself could be a reason to leave and to have a conversation. So talk a
Sure.
tiny bit about that.
Emotional and verbal abuse are as harmful as physical abuse in that they'll ebb away at someone's confidence, their sense of self. They're, constantly putting you down or kind of undermining who you are and making you feel like it's never enough. And I know that for myself, the bulk of my relationship was emotional and verbal abuse. It wasn't physical abuse. And I think at times I thought, if there was that physical line in the sand, it would have been so much more cut and dry. Although, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people that maybe the physical abuse isn't daily, it's every once in a while. But I will say the most dangerous time in any relationship where even an emotionally abusive or verbally abusive relationship could turn physical is in that first couple of weeks after someone leaves. And so, being very cognizant of people need to have that, um, the safety plan, have the plan of action in place, because even if you're leaving it's not just a verbally abusive or emotionally abusive relationship, that can be very significant. Leaving that relationship can get very dangerous very quickly. And most murder suicides that you hear about are domestic violence murders.
Well, that is an unfortunate thing, and so let's
Yeah,
shift
that's what we
gears.
do.
It's. I mean, it's so sad. I mean, my background's in nursing, and certainly we ran across a lot of those cases. Where people were injured in the hospital, and mostly women, but yes, there were men too. So it is significant for all populations. I mean, it is something that we all need to. And honestly, if we can get help for somebody who's a perpetrator and try to turn that ship around, maybe they can have a better life too. I don't think, to your point, people aren't born to abuse. And I think that probably they hate themselves more than anything when they do it. I mean, they want to fix that problem. So given the success of this, share with us some of the numbers. Like, I think you've told me how many countries have logged in and that kind of thing. And share with me, like, what's next? What's the next thing that we're going to do together so we have another anniversary next year?
Yes. Well, we have, I mean, all we've just been overwhelmed with the response globally. We've reached 101 countries of people that have actually completed the training. And I believe to date, we're at a little over 30,000 people have completed the training, which is so exciting. And here in Tennessee, I believe 77,000 beauty professionals just here in our state will be able to complete their training starting in January when it becomes a law here in Tennessee, which is so exciting. Um, and our next steps, we have exciting next steps. We are about to roll out a virtual business card, which I'm very excited about because anyone who's completed the training will be able to provide a URL code for their client. They can actually just save it straight into their home screen or into their contacts. It'll be a very simple setup. And in the card, we will have a link that provides domestic violence resources. So it can even be a very covert way for someone to get those resources into a client's hand that might need them. Even if someone wasn't ready to have that conversation or didn't feel like their client was in a position to receive that information yet, by just providing that business card, if someone clicked on it, it will have all of the resources and even the signs of what is domestic violence. It'll have a link to our training if it's a beauty professional who wants to easily access the training or share that training with a colleague. They can easily just share that card with them. So we are getting
So it'll
very
just look like a business card in my phone, like a business contact. So if I were somebody that was at risk or it was happening in my life, it's completely legit looking, right?
totally legit,
Okay.
and it's free, which is
Oh,
even
yeah.
better. It'll
Just
be a
like the
free.
training, I meant to point out, the training is also free.
Yes. So
Yeah.
the training is free. It's only 25 minutes. So it's a very, a small commitment of time. This business card will be free and hopefully it'll be available very soon. We've been hoping to roll it out here in Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I don't know if we'll meet that deadline, but hopefully. And we're also, I can't give too much information about it, but we're about to start working on a part two as well. So that will be very exciting. And hopefully we can come back next October and talk about um, our follow up training.
So a couple of things. One is on that follow-up training. I think everybody who's watching, if you've got ideas, things that you think we should have included or things that would be a next step, certainly feel free to share that in the chat. That's something that we will all look at as we, move forward into another edition of this. Also, I think one important thing that we forget about is that if you complete this training, you can print, go to barbicide.com, look for the Shear Haven training. And when you complete it, you can print a certificate that says that you are Shear Haven domestic violence trained. Now, that seems like no big deal. Who maybe cares about a certificate? But if that certificate is hanging next to your station and I'm the person who maybe is in that relationship, it makes me feel like, oh gosh, this person already has got a little bit of training. They already, they might be a good person to trust because, it's sort of like those safe place signs on fire stations, right? Where if I can't take care of my baby, I can go leave it there. It's somebody has already been trained to deal with my situation. So anyway, so I think that is a valuable thing, and people can put in the comments questions. Share as much as you can about version 2.
Absolutely. So that's exactly right. I think the more that we are able to start talking about this issue, just like any issue, the more we talk about it, the less stigma there is around it, the more comfortable people are just being vulnerable and sharing more about kind of the real deal about what's going on in their lives, especially in this world of social media where there's so much not real out there. It kind of gives people that space to be more vulnerable and um, hopefully start moving on to the other side of this. Like you said, hopefully perpetrators will feel more comfortable getting help. Hopefully people that are in these relationships will feel safe talking about it and sharing more about it. And it's a great conversation opener. So if you've been through the training, it's a way to even open up a conversation with a client by saying, I just went through this training
Yeah.
and I learned so much, or I saw part of myself and my past relationship in this training. And we also encourage people to share that certificate as soon as you take the training, share it online, share it on Facebook, Instagram, whatever platform you're on, that you can encourage other people within the industry to take the training. And also let your clients know that you're a safe space. In the part two, we're hoping we can start kind of addressing more of a barber training to offer uh, to offer a training that's more specific to the barbers in our industry. So, um, and there might end up being a part three, so the more information that people give us about what they're looking for, we would love to address it and be able to offer support.
It's sort of good news, bad news. We don't wanna have to keep going. We'd like to, part 1 and part 2 to really make a significant dent in the problem, but if we have to keep going, I was reading the comments while you were, talking, and there are a lot of comments on here from people who um, have really been in the had that experience of having a client breakdown in their salon, really, be honest with them about what was going on in their life. And so, it is impactful. And anything else you want to share before if I don't see any questions, I'm kind of scrolling through. It looks like everyone's just making comments about, things that have happened to them, and they really appreciate everything that you guys have put together. We just gave you a vehicle for it, really. But anything else you want to share?
Um, I would love to just speak to people that, like myself, are survivors or maybe even in the relationship right this second. And just encourage anyone who needs that help to at least start that conversation with a professional and know that there is great, great life and great hope on the other side of it. And I'm just so grateful for this amazing industry. I think we are the most generous hearted group of people, the people that have reached out over the last year. I've been so touched by how many people have been wanting this kind of support. And it just speaks to who people are in this industry and how they are not just hairdressers or just estheticians or, just barbers or nail techs. It's, people that have such big hearts.
Yeah. Well, my stylist used to say to me, "Well, I'm just a stylist," like it was a second class choice that she had made in her life. And I was like, the reality is every day that I get up and I go to work and I feel good about myself, a good portion of that is you. Like you did something that, makes me feel confident, and don't ever shortcut yourself that way. There are a couple questions. Somebody asked again, how much does it cost? It's free, and it will always be free. And in our opinion at Barbicide, this is the kind of information that we should be supporting, and we have a platform to do it. And so it is free. And poor Adam has asked a question a long time ago, and it got a little overlooked. So I'm going to find Adam's question. And his question was, are most abusers personality disordered? I think what he's asking is, do most abusers have a personality disorder that's diagnosed maybe? Or if I'm guessing the question is, if it was, what is that personality? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let you answer it.
Well, and I can say that I'm not really qualified to speak to that specifically, but I think a lot of abusers, kind of like we talked about earlier in the conversation, a lot of them are people that just grew up in homes that exhibited that kind of behavior as normal. And we do kind of go through a lot of the myths in the training about um, ideas that people have always held about domestic abuse that are not true. A lot of people think that it's just it's because of substance abuse or it's because of an anger issue. It's not an anger issue, it's a control issue. The angry person who's yelling at everyone at the grocery store or has road rage maybe have an anger issue, but it may not be the person who's actually the abuser in a relationship. The abuser may be the person that you would never, ever believe was the abuser. They're very controlled in their personal or in their life outside of their relationship, but It may be someone that you would never think was the abuser. And while substance can kind of throw gasoline on a fire, it can, if someone has too much to drink or, is using drugs, getting them sober is not going to solve the abuse problem. That's something that may make it bigger or look different if they're using substances, but it's not something that actually causes the abuse. And so, that's something that we've also touched on in the training. So I think there's a lot of really helpful information that people
Yeah.
will learn about when they take
Yep.
it.
And certainly mental health issues, substance abuse, they all can be triggers, but they aren't just because you have a certain personality disorder. In the movies, they all appear to be narcissistic personality disorders. Those are all that's uh, J Lo's the movie she was in. Enough that it's what you see a lot in the movies, but it comes, I think, to your point, it can be anybody who this is how they have learned to deal with frustration, right? Is anger, and anger pointed at another person. It's hard to know off the surface who that might be. So thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you to everybody who listened.
Oh, thank
If you
you.
have ideas that you want to see in this content that's moving forward in the next set of content, certainly you can reach out. You've got both of our handles. You can go through Behind the Chair. There's a million ways to get a hold of us at Barbicide. You go to our website and go to contact us, make whatever notes you want. And we will certainly work closely together and hopefully have another anniversary next year.
Yes, I can't wait.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.